Thank you very much. Thank you. We spend most of our waking hours at work, and yet most people don't like the work. In fact, research around the world has shown that only 1 in 5 people are fully engaged in what they do. And what can we do about the fact that we're not happy at work? What can we do to become happier at work? Well, one thing we can do is change our job, find a different place to work. Now, for some people, that's realistic. For other people, it's not, for various reasons. First of all, it may not be an option. It may be that I have to keep my job or 3 jobs in order to provide for my family. I don't have the luxury of leaving. But even if I do have the luxury of leaving, I may not want to give up my lifestyle, the lifestyle that I'm enjoying thanks to the work that I'm doing. So I'm not happy, but at least my family, myself can enjoy the kind of life that I envisioned. And that's legitimate, it's fine. And then there are those who can leave their work, but they have left previous jobs so many times, and time again, they were disappointed, which leads them to realize that it's not about the external. It's much more about them and their inability to enjoy their work. So what do we do? What is left for us to do if leaving, changing our work will not solve the problem? What we need to do is change our perspective. And I want to give an extreme example of changing perspective, because if it applies in that domain, it certainly applies to our work. Viktor Frankl, in his seminal book, Man's Search for Meaning, wrote about Holocaust survivors. He wrote about Auschwitz inmates who spent years in the most difficult of circumstances, and yet they were able to find a ray of hope, of light in their predicament, not by changing their reality because they couldn't, but by changing their perspective. And he writes about them. When we're no longer able to change a situation, we're challenged to change ourselves. Now, if Viktor Frankl found that it was possible in these difficult circumstances, being in a concentration camp, well, then it's likely possible to do it in less extreme and difficult circumstances at work. And when it comes to work, the change in perspective comes in the form of recrafting our work. And I want to illustrate this through a study, or a group of studies, which were conducted on work orientation by Amy Wisniewski and Jane Dutton when they were at Michigan. What this research showed was people's work orientation can be divided into 3 groups. There are those employees in the workplace that see their work as a job. What's a job? It's something that I have to do. It's something that I have no choice about. It's something that I'm doing because I need the paycheck. What am I looking forward to? I'm looking forward to the end of the week, the weekend. I'm looking forward to the vacation, the end of the day. I have no choice, but I'm here and I'm doing it. It's a chore, it's a duty. But then there is another orientation toward work. There are people who see their work not as a job, but rather as a career. What are the characteristics of a career? It's all about getting to the next stage. I want this promotion. I want to get this raise. This is important for me. I'm in that race. I'm going to do better and better, grow more and more, become richer and richer. It's my career. It's important to me. And then there is a group of employees who see their work not as a job, nor as a career, but as a calling. For these people, their work is their purpose. This is the most important thing, beyond perhaps their relationships, that they can think of doing. It matters a great deal. In fact, they would do it anyway. Even if they weren't paid for it, they're glad they are, but they would do it anyway because they care about it, they love it. It's their passion. It provides them a sense of purpose and meaning. Now, needless to say, where we are, whether we see our work as a job or as a career or as a calling, matters a great deal. People who see their work as a calling are much more engaged, they're much happier at work and in life in general. They also perform a lot better. Now, it doesn't mean that we can always be in the calling perspective. We all have sometimes when we see our work as a job, as a chore, and we just can't wait to the end of the day or week. And we all experience our work as a career, sometimes when we want to progress. And sometimes everybody experiences some sense of calling or purpose or connection in one or few things that they do in life. The question is of degree. And the question is, how can we spend more of our time in the calling area, orientation, than in a career, and certainly more than we spend our time in a job? Now, it turns out that we have a choice about it. So Wisniewski and Dutton conducted the research. The first group that they studied were hospital workers. And what they found was that in the hospitals, there were janitors who cleaned the hospital, who changed the bed sheets, who tidied up the toilets. That's what they did day in and day out, who saw their work as a job. A job, something I have to do. I have no choice. I need the money to feed my family. It's a duty. There were also janitors who did the exact same thing, changing bed sheets, cleaning up toilets, did the exact same thing, who saw their work as a career. I need to progress here. I want to become the head janitor or responsible for the hospital. I'm going to make more money. And then there were janitors who were doing the exact same thing as those who saw their work as a job or a career, but saw their work as a calling. They saw their work as facilitating the health of the patients, as enabling wellness. Now, all three groups at times resided in the job world, in the career world, or in the calling world. However, there was a group who saw most of their work as a calling. Needless to say, they performed a lot better, the job satisfaction was a lot higher. Now, interestingly, in those same hospitals, there were nurses and doctors who saw their work as a job. There were nurses and doctors who saw their work as a career. I just want to progress, be the head of the department, or get my full professorship. And in those very hospitals, there were also doctors and nurses who saw their work as a calling. Which means that it's not just about the objective circumstances of what we do. Much more so, it's about the subjective interpretation of our experience. Dutton and Wisniewski conclude, even in the most restricted and routine jobs, employees can exert some influence on what is the essence of their work. They replicated these exact same findings among hairdressers, the exact same findings among engineers, people in high tech, among teachers who have a choice about seeing their work as a job, a career, as a calling. Now, there is nothing wrong with sometimes seeing your work as a job, and there's a lot of motivation involved in being in a career. All fine, all good, all important. The question is, how do we shift the dial a little bit so that we can experience more of our time being in that calling orientation? Because that makes a big difference to our overall levels of well-being, as well as to our professional and personal success. There's a story of a man who goes to visit in Italy, and he walks by a construction site, and he sees builders all over, and he goes to the first builder, and he asks the builder, "What are you doing?" And the builder says to him, "I'm laying bricks." And then he goes to the second builder, who was not far from the first one, and he says, "What are you doing?" And the builder says, "I'm building a wall." And he continues walking in the construction site, and he sees a third builder, and he asks him, "What are you doing?" And the builder says, "I'm creating a cathedral to the glory of God." The same experience, very different interpretation that can make all the difference. And the question is, what choices can we make on a day-to-day basis? What choices can we make that can transform, change the form of our work, that can change our experiences? Let me mention a few that are taken from the research in this area. The first one is we can change activities. We can stay in the same work and yet do things that are more aligned with our values, that are more meaningful to us. For example, we can volunteer to organize the end of the year party if what we like is organizing. That may not be part of our job description, but it may provide a lot of happiness to us. We may choose to call up certain people who are role models for us and ask to work with them, spend more time with them. And the interesting thing is that we can make small changes to our work that can have a trickle effect on our overall experience. So it doesn't have to be radical transformation. Small changes make a big difference. Another thing that we can do is exercise our strength on a regular basis. So this is research done by Marty Seligman. What he did was he went to supermarkets and he asked the employees in the supermarket to do a strength test, a strength finder. And they identified their strength. And here's one example. So this is an example of a bagger, a woman who stands by the counter and puts the groceries into the bag of the customers. That's what she does day in and day out. Now, she saw her work as a job. Boring, not interesting, she had to do it. She took the strength finder, and her top strength was social intelligence, social relations. So she was asked to exercise her top strength on a daily basis. Specifically, what she had to do was interact with the customers and to make that experience, that interaction with her, the highlight of the day for at least 3 customers. That was her objective. That transformed her work because she started to focus on making those customers happy through her very brief interaction. Her focus changed, her perspective of what she does. She's not just a bagger putting groceries in all day. She's also a person who makes people happy. In fact, in general, social relations have been shown to shift us toward the calling part of work orientation. One of the things that was unique to the janitors who saw their work as a calling was social interactions. Let me give you an example, a study that was conducted on social interactions. So this is done by Adam Grant, who's a professor at Wharton. Adam Grant went to people whose work was to raise money for their universities. That was their work. They would call alumni of the university and ask them for money. Now, at that work, you hear many, many more no's than yeses. Not easy. But that's what they did day in and day out for hours and hours. So here is what he did with them. He took half of them, half of the group, and had them each meet with a person, with a student from their university who was on financial aid, who received help from the university. And they talked to them for 15 minutes. Now, why was that important? Because the reason why they raise money, one of the main reasons why they raise money, is so that the university can provide scholarship for students. So this student who came in told them about what an amazing experience they were having at the university and how grateful they were for getting the financial aid, because without that scholarship, they wouldn't have been able to experience what they were experiencing, and how grateful they were. 15-minute conversation. Those 15 minutes, when they went back to work, those people who raise funds every day, increased their job satisfaction. Suddenly the work was a lot more meaningful to them. It also improved their performance. They raised 250% more money than those who didn't experience that intervention. Just because for 15 minutes they were put in touch with other people, with the beneficiaries of their action. Look at the difference that this social interaction made. And it made that big difference because it was meaningful. And we can always focus on what is meaningful at work. I want to share with you a recent experience that my wife and I had when we took out a mortgage to buy our apartment. We went to the bank and we met the mortgage officer. And the minute I saw the mortgage officer, I noticed that something was going on here, something unusual. She was unusually happy. Very happy, in fact. And I thought, it must be, she must have had a good day, good night. Something happened, and Fine, we'll deal with that. And she was talking to us for 45 minutes about 3.1% interest, 3.2. It depends if you take it for 15 years or 30 years, giving us all the options, showing us Excel sheet after Excel sheet after Excel sheet. And she was very excited and cheerful. Okay, so the next time I go alone for our second follow-up meeting, and she's the same. At this point, I'm becoming suspicious, and I say, again, I'll have what she's having. She's very cheerful, and all she does is she goes after Excel sheet after Excel sheet after Excel sheet, explaining to me what's going on here and what kind of loan we can take, benefits of each. Third time, Tommy and I go together, this time to sign the paper. Now, all we do for around 40 minutes, all we do is sign papers. 63 sheets of paper. Sign here, sign here. Now, she is ecstatic. It didn't end. This was, more than a week later. So, I can't help myself at this point. This is what I do for a living. I talk about happiness. I have to ask her. So I do. And I first say to her, and I say, you really like your work, don't you? She says, I love my work. And I said, really? And I said, why? And she says to me the following. She says, because every day I get to help people fulfill their dreams. And then she looks at me and she says, and today I'm going to do the same for you. And she did. We wouldn't have been able to buy that apartment without the loan. Now, there are thousands and thousands of mortgage officers all over the world who go over interest rates, who go over Excel sheets, who ask people to sign here, here, and here. And they're not happy at work. They see their work as a job or maybe as a career. She sees her work as a calling, not because she's ignoring part of reality. I'm sure she has her days too, but because she chooses to focus on one particular area of work that to her is the most important. And it is a choice. Do we choose to focus on what is meaningful and real in what we do? So this is research done in a Jerusalem hospital by Dr. Jonathan Turner. And he studied radiologists who receive dozens and hundreds and thousands of scans that they have to analyze. They get CT scans and they get MRIs day in and day out. And what he did with one group, he gave them particular scans that they had to go over. And then he went to another group and gave them the exact same scans to go over, to diagnose, to study, with one difference. The second group, he also attached to those scans a picture of the patient. That difference made all the difference. Those radiologists, those professionals who also saw a picture, their levels of empathy went up. Their experience of meaning and purpose increased as a result. And finally, their diagnosis was significantly more accurate and correct. Just because there was a picture. Because now it's not just another scan. It's meaningful. It's a human life. Now, all scans are of living human beings. It's just that sometimes we need to remind ourselves that what we're doing matters, that what we're doing makes a difference. And we need to connect to it either in person, as the Adam Grant study showed, or even through a picture. Or by having some reminder that what we do makes a difference, so that we can make a difference in our experience and in other people's lives. You see, in many ways, it's about finding the spiritual in what we are already doing. Now, not necessarily spiritual in this religious sense. One of the definitions of the word spirituality in the dictionary is to find the sense of significance in something. And we can find significance in interactions, in change we're bringing about, in the consequences of our work, whether it's to our family or to the people we serve. And that's what real spirituality is about. You see, an investment banker who finds meaning and purpose in her work is a lot more spiritual than a monk who does his work out of a sense of duty or chore. One of the exercises that I like doing, very much like doing with organizations that I work with, is to get them to write down what they really do at work. You see, because we very often are asked to write our job description, what we do and how we do it and how we can transfer our work to other people after, when we're not around. Well, rather than a job description, what I ask them to do is write their calling description. What is it about your work that is meaningful, that's important, that's even spiritual? Because when you focus on that, when you appreciate that, that becomes a larger and more important part of your work. It becomes a more important part of your work because focus creates reality. And I want to go back to Viktor Frankl, who in the most dire of situations showed how it was possible to find some sense of meaning and purpose. And it's the people who did that who were more likely, it didn't guarantee, but they were more likely to survive. This is what he writes in Man's Search for Meaning. We who lived in concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the huts comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And if Viktor Frankl found that in concentration camps in Auschwitz, then we can certainly find it in our day-to-day, at work and at home. And there's a lot of research showing how much focus matters. For example, researchers, Tomaka and others, took students who had test anxiety, performance anxiety. And what they did with them is they asked them to change one word in describing their experience. Instead of seeing the test as a threat, to see their test as a challenge. That one word actually significantly changed their experience of the test. They were much more excited, less nervous about it, and consequently they performed better. I think about this study a lot when I lecture, because I would often see a lecture as threatening, as ominous. Whereas now I've changed, I've reframed with two words. I see it as a privilege to share what I care about most with others. And I see it as an opportunity for playing, for fun. And that makes all the difference. Words create worlds. Our focus creates reality. And then there's a lot of research on child rearing. You see, when I go home and my kids are there and I spend time with them, I have to go through the motion of putting them to bed and feeding them, and sometimes they don't listen and they don't want to go brush their teeth. And I can see it as a chore day in and day out. What an imposition. And at the same time, I can look at the exact same experience and say, wow, what a privilege this is to spend time with the people I care about most in the world. And sometimes all it takes is this single reminder. And that switch happens. And the whole evening is different. Or think about teachers who can go through their days and say, well, I'm disciplining day in and day out. And they also are cultivating the young minds. And the question is, what do you choose to focus on? And that choice is largely up to us. Because if they did that, if they chose in the most extreme circumstances, we certainly can. And we certainly can do it in our relationships. As our relationships grow over time, what do we focus on? On the fact that we're limited, that it's an imposition, or on the fact that here is an opportunity to learn, to grow, to get to know one another better. And it's this decision to choose one versus the other that can make all the difference in a relationship. And finally, what we have seen, do we see our work as a job, as a career, or as a calling? At every moment in our lives, whether we are janitors or doctors, whether we're teachers or engineers, whether we're hairdressers or pilots, we have a choice. And that choice affects our job satisfaction. That job affects how creative we are. That choice affects how productive we are. We enjoy our work a lot more, and since we spend most of our waking hours at work, it also affects our life as a whole, where we can lead a richer, more fulfilling life. Thank you.